During our demonstrations, we explored the variety of IP addresses assigned to our EC2 instances. We identified three main types: public IP addresses, private IP addresses, and the elastic IP addresses. It is essential to understand the differences between these, not only for the exam, but also to enrich your learning. So, let me briefly review each of these to make sure we have a clear understanding. So, we have our AWS account, and in this there's an availability zone. Let's say we have two subnets within that availability zone, and we have an EC2 instance, and that instance has an interface on one of the public subnets. That interface has a private IP address and a public IP address. Then, it has another interface on another subnet within the same availability zone, or AZ, and it has a private IP. So, a public IP address is a dynamic address. What that means is that it could change. So, when you stop your instance and start it again, it will take a new IPv4 public address. The private address stays the same, but the public address will change. That means you need to make sure you don't use that IP address in the application code because it could change at any time. So, one thing we can do is to use something called the elastic IP or EIP. An elastic IP is also a public IP, but it is a static address. Therefore, it does not change. Now, we can also assign elastic IP addresses to our network interfaces, as I explained earlier. So, what we can do is we can associate the elastic IP with this network interface here. So, this second address here, it's an elastic address, and that means it's static and it won't change. So, we can stop our instance, start it again as many times as we want, and this address will always be the same. Now, what if our instance fails, and let's say we have some applications pointing to this IP address? What we can do is assign that IP address to another instance. I mean, we have two options here. One is that we can move the elastic network adapter. Remember, we can move it between different instances within this same availability zone. So, both the NI and the IP can be reassigned to a different instance. Then, once we've done that, that means that the second instance is now responding to any request that comes to this IP address. And, of course, you can also automate this programmatically. Now, another option is what if you have a failure, but you want to be able to fail over between availability zones. So you want to be able to protect yourself in case that availability zone fails. Well, now we have an instance in a separate availability zone. It also has two network interfaces. And what we're going to do is, we're going to move the elastic IP address. So, the EIPs can be reassigned between the availability zones. But remember, the elastic network interfaces can't do that. They are within an availability zone. Therefore, you can reassign them to a different subnet in the same AZ or a different instance in the same subnet, but you cannot reassign them between availability zones. So, let's summarize the key differences. Public addresses are dynamic. They are lost when the instance is stopped. They are used in public subnets. You don't pay for them. They are associated with a private IP on the instance. You cannot move them between instances. Private addresses are retained when the instance is stopped and are used in both public and private subnets. So, you always have a private address. And then, elastic IP addresses, or EIP addresses, are static public addresses. You will be charged if you are not using them. So, if they're assigned to your account, but they're not being used, you'll pay a fee for them. They are associated with a private IP on the instance and can be moved between instances and elastic network adapters. So, that's it for this class. We will continue to discuss this topic as we move forward in this section. See you next time.